Is Rock and Rye a bottled old-fashioned cocktail or is it cough syrup? And today we're going to talk about it because it may be both. So let's get started. I'm Darcy O'Neill, this is Art of Drink, and the Rock and Rye, or Rock and Rye, goes back at least to the 1850s. I found references to it, but it probably goes long before that because we've been adding sugar to distillate since at least the 1500s to create liqueurs and elixirs. So it's not uncommon to add sugar to a distillate. But in the case of Rock and Rye, there was a period in time where it just was something people did because they liked sweeter rye whiskey. Because rye whiskey, if you know anything about it, has this kind of spiciness that and a little bit of burn. Some people find it pleasant, like me, others don't. So if you add sugar to it, it kind of tempers it. It wasn't really popular at the bar, though it can be found in old bar books. Where it really became popular was the soda fountain / pharmacies in the early 1880s. And it was because of a company called Lawrence and Martin who started selling Rock and Rye and Tolu. So this is an important differentiation. This is where Rock and Rye changes from just sweetened rye whiskey to an actual medicine, and the idea with it being a cough syrup was that you didn't have to pay taxes on it, or at least didn't have to pay taxes on the distillate, and you didn't have to pay a special permit fee to manufacture it, aka a distiller's license. Making it a medicine was beneficial for the profit margins. And Tolu was well known within the pharmaceutical community long before Lawrence and Martin created this. Some people believed it had, medical properties, but a lot of pharmacists in old pharmaceutical manuals just say it was a way to cover up bad flavors of bitter medicines. And Tolu has a fantastic flavor. It's mostly cinnamon and vanilla. There are other floral elements to it, but it's a really pleasant aroma. They use it in perfumes a lot for an amber note. And we still use it in flavoring, and some cough syrups in certain parts of the world still incorporate it, whether it's just as a flavoring or if it does have some properties, or no real research on whether it works or not. But it does make a great flavor compound. So today what we're going to do is we're going to make the Lawrence and Martin version of Rock and Rye and Tolu. Now, they were a patent medicine, and they didn't get a patent on it. The patent medicine refers to the trademark through the Patent and Trademark Office. So whenever you hear a patent medicine, it just means a trademark. And that meant others couldn't make Tolu Rock and Rye. So Rock and Rye was a common term, but Tolu Rock and Rye was specific to Lawrence and Martin. And this meant other people needed to create different things. So they created cherry Rock and Rye using cherry bark. Chamomile, celery Rock and Rye. There was even Rock and Cognac, Rock and New England Rum, Rock and Jamaica, Rock and Schiedam. So there was all these different Rock and Rye or Rock and Spirit versions in the early 1800s. All that came to an abrupt halt around the mid-1880s because the government realized that this was just a beverage, and so they took this special tax status, aka no taxes, and they started taxing the alcohol in these medicines, and specifically Rock and Rye. So that kind of took the wind out of the sails of this product. However, it's been popular. It still exists. People still make it. But it is actually the Tolu and Lawrence and Martin's combination in 1880, a little bit before that, that really made Rock and Rye popular. So I'm going to whip up a batch of Rock and Rye with Tolu, and we'll see whether it's just an old-fashioned cocktail or a cough syrup. To make this, you're going to need 3 ingredients. You're going to need some rye whiskey, preferably something in the 50% ABV range or higher if you can find it. You're going to need some simple syrup, and you're going to need some Tolu. Now, this is basically a resin or a sap that comes from a South American tree. It is related to balsam of Peru. They're just harvested differently from the same tree. Now Tolu, sometimes you can find it in like a resin form, kind of like pine resin. But if you look around, you can find a refined version where they just extract the aroma compounds from it, and you'll get a liquid form, which is much easier to work with. Now we can't use this full strength, so we're going to dilute it down a little bit and we're going to make a tincture. And I've done a previous video on tinctures, and usually tinctures are 10% solutions. In the case of Tolu, it is a 20% solution. So to make that, I'm just going to make 10 mils. So we're going to take 2 mils of Tolu, and then we're going to fill this bottle up to the 10 mil mark, and that's going to be our 20% solution. It's really easy to do. So you just basically take your Tolu. Now I use a disposable pipette. These things are pretty accurate. You'll see that they have like graduations on us. This one goes up to 3 mils. So if you can get it at the 2 mil mark, that's perfect. And again, if you're off by a little bit, it is not a big deal, because this is all about flavor and not necessarily about analytical chemistry. So once you get it, you'll always find that you have a little bit left over in there, but the reason we add this first is so that we could take our alcohol, which is this. So I just distill this. This is a bourbon mash that I've been using, but any high alcohol you can find is good. 75% or above is better. You can dissolve it in this, but it'll come out a little bit cloudy. So I just take a little beaker and just add, 10 mils. The reason you don't take it right out of here is you get Tolu in there and kind of ruin it. So what you do is you basically just add the alcohol, and when you're doing it this way, you're basically rinsing out your pipette, so you're getting all of the essential oil that you need. Once that's done, you just basically put the cap on it and you give it a good shake, and that will dissolve. It may take a few minutes to dissolve and clarify, but it's generally, if you're using something over 60-70% alcohol, it will come out clear. If you're just using your rye whiskey to do it, it will come out a little cloudy. That is fine. When it goes into the final drink, it'll clear up. So now that we have that, we're going to assemble the drink. It's really simple. It's kind of like making an old fashioned, but we're going to kind of do it in a slightly different order. And that's because what we want is the Tolu tincture to dissolve in the rye whiskey. So Whistle Pig, it's a good rye whiskey. Lots of people talk about it. If you ever wonder what it tastes like, it's got that definite spicy rye kick to it. And even if you had a sore throat right now, drinking a little rye whiskey does kind of soothe it. But what we're going to do is add 50 mils of our whiskey, or rye, sorry. And then we're going to add our Tolu tincture. And you'll see that it comes out pretty clear. It's perfectly clear, actually. So this dropper is a 0.25 milliliter dropper, so that's the volume that comes out. And because we diluted this basically 10 to 2 or 5 to 1, this amount, 0.25 mils of the tincture, is equivalent to 1 metric drop of that. And a metric drop is 0.05 mils. So that's how much oil is going in here, but it's actually a volume of 0.25 mils with the alcohol we added in here. Now you may notice it goes a little bit cloudy when you first put it in. Again, this is a resinous material, so there's a little bit of resin in it, but it dissolves perfectly clear once you get it into the drink, or once you get into the alcohol. Now the next step is to add our simple syrup. Now, because I'm making this kind of in an old-fashioned style, I'm not making it as strong as Rock and Rye, which when they did Rock and Rye, the idea was that they put in so much sugar that some of the sugar would crystallize out. And that was a sign, an indication of quality. So if you saw sugar crystals in the bottom of your bottle, it meant that you had a fully saturated solution of sugar syrup, or the maximum amount of sugar you could dissolve in the rye. So if you bought rock candy syrup, you wanted to see some crystals in it. Otherwise, you didn't know what concentration of sugar, water, simple syrup you were getting if there were no crystals in it. So it's just an easy way for people to understand what they were getting. Now for this is equivalent to 2 teaspoons of sugar. Less than you would find in Rock and Rye, but more than you may find in an old fashioned. Feel free to adjust, but I'm just kind of trying to hit the middle mark with this. So give it a stir and it should come out clear. So that everything's dissolved, we just have to add a couple cubes of ice. And then again, stir to chill. So the Tolu basically acts, or the Tolu tincture basically acts like your Angostura bitters that you'd normally put in a old fashioned. Now that that's slightly chilled, I will be putting some orange in it, but I want to try it without the orange. Orange is such a powerful flavor that it can change things. So doing it this way. Now it smells great. It's got that rye, vanilla, cinnamon notes from the combination of these, so it definitely has a good aroma. Now the one thing, it does have an old-fashioned element to it, but the one thing you really notice about the Tolu is this pine note. It's not unpleasant, but it's definitely not Angostura bitter aromatics. So I can actually see this stuff working, this Tolu tincture, working well with gin. But it's a pleasant, it's a different flavor, but there is a pine note to it, or something to it. Now if we added a small amount of orange peel, now obviously fresh orange oil expressed over a cocktail will change the whole nature of the cocktail. Orange is such a powerful aroma, and because even using a small piece of zest will definitely increase the aromatic profile of this, which it has. I can smell it from here. Now it definitely tastes more like a old fashioned, but it still has that pine note from the Tolu, and it has the vanilla and the cinnamon, and the rye, it's still in there. You still get the spiciness. So is it cough syrup or is it an old fashioned? I'd say it's an old fashioned. Though it probably does help if you have a sore throat, because the rye whiskey, the sugar, one thing about sugar, if you ever take your kids to get a needle, give them a lollipop or a piece of sugar or something sweet just before they stick the needle in the kid, because the sugar actually distracts. Sugar is a powerful element in the human mind, because humans don't live very long without fuel, and sugar is human fuel. So we're always seeking it out, and we will ignore pain if we can get some sugar. Rye whiskey has that burn, so it will distract from the sore throat. So it's kind of like having a headache, taking a hammer, hitting your thumb. Now you have a sore thumb, but your headache will be temporarily gone. Your body can really only focus on so many pain points. So having a little burn in your throat from the rye whiskey will distract from a sore throat. And who knows, maybe a Tolu does have some properties that will help you. And if not, it's a great end of night drink. Soothes your throat in a loud bar if you've been yelling all night, trying to talk to people. So it's definitely an interesting drink. I would put it on a menu. It's reminiscent of a lot of other old-fashioned style cocktails like the Vieux Carré or Sazerac, that style of drink. And it's just a slight variation. Really simple to make, and sometimes trying new things is good for you. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.